Hey there, welcome into Unpaid Interns on Monday morning. It is the first day of February, and we're doing something a little bit different today on Unpaid Interns. It has been 3.5 months since I have hosted Unpaid Interns. It has been an absolute blast. Have had 32 different episodes, 32 different guests. Jack Grossman has come on twice, but we had a senior spotlight episode with 2 guests. It's been so fun having so many different people on, and thought as we enter the month of February, a new month, it'd be a good time to go back and spotlight some of my favorite shows, some of the best guests, best stories. So we're going to give you a look back at some of the highlights from the last 3 months of Unpaid Interns. It's been so much fun. Coming up, we'll have some of the best stories that some of our guests told on Unpaid Interns, plus brought on a lot of broadcasters and journalists who had a lot of great advice. So we're going to hear that first. But want to start with IU football memories because this was the story for much of Unpaid Interns. It was talking about IU football. It was the story in Bloomington. It was the story across much of college football was IU football's rise, and brought on so many guests who had so many different thoughts about IU football, from the miraculous comeback against Penn State to thoughts on Tom Allen's leadership, and really trying to discuss what changed for IU football this season. It was certainly a season to remember, and here's some of the best guests' thoughts and memories on IU football from the 2020-21 season.
I mean, it was stunning. They didn't do the IU football thing. They did blow the lead, but then instead of just lying down and taking a 28-20 loss or a 21-20 loss, they came back. They made the big plays they needed to, even before they blew the lead. They got that 4th-and-1 stop on 4th down. They drove down the field to score a touchdown and tie the game. They got the controversial call to go their way with the Michael Penix 2-point conversion. It was for Indiana football to finally do the Tom Allen breakthrough thing and get the win over a top 10 team that they've been looking for so long. It was the most Indiana football way to do it. And honestly, I think it's the most fitting way for them to do it.
I felt confident in the quarterback, Mike Penix, that he would get the job done. They tied the game. Penn State comes down, scores, kicks an extra point. And now it's up to Indiana to rely on Penix again. They score, and I love it. Tom Allen, after 33 years of not beating a top 10 team, recognizes the situation and goes for it, and they get it by an eyelash, and I was elated. What did I do? I was sitting in my office at home watching it, and my daughters are watching it with me, so that's very special. I got my 14-year-old and my 9-year-old with me and the dogs. So Audrey says, Dad, if they call it a touchdown, this is my 9-year-old. She said, if they call it a 2-point conversion and they win, are you going to run a lap around the yard for us? And I go, I will do that if they call it a 2-point conversion. So the replay shows 2-point conversion. They can't overturn it. And I'm out the door and I'm running a lap around the backyard, and the girls are cheering and the dogs are chasing me. It was a nice fan moment for this IU guy.
I started for the IDS. I don't know if you want like a biography of me, but I started for the
Go
IDS.
ahead. We got time.
And then I worked for IU. I actually worked for IU athletics from end of freshman year through senior year, as like a photographer, social media renaissance man type thing. And there was a lot of bad IU football games that I went to, and there were no fans there. And then I ended up senior year going back to the IDS and covering basketball and being a basketball and football photographer. So I've seen some tough times, and this is fun. I don't remember anything like this.
Have you, Dr. Galen Clavios, the head of the sports media department here, has broken his door. He's caused some property damage. I mean, what have been your reactions to the Penn State game and then the historic Michigan victory on the weekend? Has all your property maintained intact?
I have to admit something. I didn't watch all the Penn State game. I watched the second half of the Penn State game. I made other plans. I didn't think they would be competitive. Maybe that's on me. I just expect the worst with IU football. By senior year, the plan was, tailgate and then go to the bar. Like, you don't go to the games. That's just not what you do. So yeah, I missed the first half and then jumped into it midway through the second half, or probably like I don't know, early on in the second half, and then I watched the rest from there. And I was can I say something a little controversial?
Go ahead.
I don't think that was that I don't think he scored there at the end. I don't think the ball passed, but there have been so many other times where IU's gotten screwed over that we'll take it. And then Rutgers, great. Michigan. Wait, it was Michigan, right? Not Michigan State.
Michigan on Saturday, yes.
This week's Michigan State.
This week is Michigan State, correct.
Yeah. I mean, it was gutsy, and it just seems like the team's thriving. And, you see that clip of Tom Allen just, attacking a player basically with a celebration. And I don't know. I'm like the biggest skeptic, and I feel like I'm more cynical than most, but I'm kind of buying in a little.
I will say this: they were so close in so many years, and sometimes in a lot of games that I was fortunate to call for Indiana, and so it actually reminded me of when I was actually a local reporter at a CBS affiliate in Lansing, Michigan, and when Mark D'Antonio took the job at Michigan State, his first couple of years there, he was so close, and some heartbreaking losses. And, he became famous for his phrase of "it's a game of inches." And that literally sometimes was the difference between Michigan State winning and losing football games. I was thinking about that comparison between Michigan State, where they were at that point, versus where Indiana was at. And I see a lot of parallels. Number one, Griffin, I see parallels between the two head coaches in terms of not necessarily personality and how they coach, but the fact that they were very clear and defined about their culture and the style of play that they were going to play. And then, of course, the natural comparison that I'm getting to, and the parallel in the fact that Michigan State was so close in winning games and had to somehow get over that hump. And now it seems like Indiana is doing exactly what Michigan State found in the secret to success, is closing the gap, even though the gap was about this big, but closing the gap to some of those games in particular against ranked opponents that they weren't able to do in the past. Now, I can't project if Indiana is going to have that same success that Michigan State was able to get to in terms of winning Big Ten championships, in terms of being a football playoff contender during really kind of the meat of Mark D'Antonio's tenure. I can't predict if Tom Allen and Indiana are going to get to that point, but it's just really interesting to me to kind of see the parallels between the two programs.
Belief in themselves as a unit. And I think that one of the overarching themes of IU football for many, many years, decades, it has been the feeling that IU doesn't really belong on the same field. And there's always that lingering doubt. And you could see it in past vintages of IU football, in the body language of the team, in the way that they reacted to adversity, in the way that they just didn't measure up. There have been cases where IU has just been significantly less talented. And I think, Ohio State's certainly a team that, if you look at the recruiting rankings and the types of players they get in, it's an insane amount of talent compared to what IU's got. But the difference in this team is that they really do believe in themselves. And that really comes back to the coaching staff and the way that Tom Allen and his staff have been able to instill that sense of belief, that sense of belonging, and that sense of, if we keep fighting all the way through, good things are going to happen to us. So look, they still didn't beat Ohio State, and that, so that sort of thing's only going to take you so far. And there's still a lot to clean up in terms of not making mistakes and not committing, silly penalties or costly turnovers. But the belief really is where it has to start. And I think you look across the board at the programs in the conference that have gone from being bad football programs to being good football programs. So much of it centered around that issue of belief. And, whether you're talking about a program like Northwestern, who went from being the laughingstock of the conference in the 70s and 80s and early 90s to going to a Rose Bowl and now being a consistent bowl entrant, to, a program like Wisconsin, who was also not very good and became very good, largely not because they were getting 4- and 5-star recruits, but because they started to believe in what they were doing. They had a system that they used that worked. That's, I think, what you're looking at here with IU. And I think it's cool to watch it develop because we've all seen enough of IU football where they haven't had that it's a tangible difference. It's almost like shocking to see it on the field now. And it's like, that doesn't look like IU football.
I firmly believe that to lead is to serve. I think example goes a whole lot farther in instilling, leadership than just, kind of that top-down method where you just dictate everything. When you look at the personality, when you looked at the characteristics of Tom Allen, he's so incredibly energetic. He's so incredibly over the top. He's so incredibly optimistic that at first it's so extreme that it's almost difficult to comprehend just how genuine all that is and what kind of a place that's coming from. And I think when you look at the results Tom Allen's been able to achieve here at Indiana, both since he came as a coordinator and then as well since he's taken the head position, Tom Allen is as genuine of an individual as I think you're going to find in the NC2As at any level in any sport. His passion is real. His love is real.
Now, those were some great IU football memories, and another part of what makes sports great and what made podcasting great and really made the last 3 months of Unpaid Interns so much fun was some of the great stories our guests told. We had stories ranging from cardboard cutout fandoms to camera problems to World Series drama. Here are some of the best stories from the last 3 months of Unpaid Interns.
So I was there at the World Series doing some stuff for MLB Network, but I didn't have to work that day. So I was at the game as a fan. And before the game, IU played Penn State. Well, I went to IU. I grew up in Bloomington. Big IU fan, obviously. And I have watched some horrific IU football. I covered the season where they went 1-11. Let me tell you, that was not an enjoyable time. So I watched the IU game before I went. I was watching it with my friend who is a Penn State fan. He works for the Rays. So we're watching it, and I'm like, the pessimist in me, after so much heartbreak, I was like, they're not going to pull this off. They're not going to pull this off. It's not going to happen. And then they did, and I just went nuts. I went nuts. We were at a restaurant, and I was like, ah! And that is the beginning of when I lost my voice. So that happened. The World Series started about 10 minutes later, right? So I go to the World Series as a fan for the first time in like ever. And I'm sitting up there, and it's the 9th inning. We're down to our last out, our last strike. And I'm just like, like this isn't going to happen. Brett Phillips comes up. God love Brett Phillips, but he is not the guy that I would have said he is going to be the savior here. I was like, oh, no, Brett Phillips is coming up. And it's nothing against him. He hadn't seen an at-bat in something like 17 games. He was left off the ALCS roster. It's just, guys, you got to get your timing down when you come back from not playing for so long. So I'm just like, we're done. That's it. We're done. It's over. This is just depressing. And then the unthinkable happens. And I'm like, okay, we tied the game. Woo, we tied the game. Yay. Randy Rosarena comes around third and he falls. And I'm like, no, get up. Error after error after error after error after error by the Dodgers. They couldn't do a thing right in a span of 8 seconds. And Randy Rosarena scored. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my mind. If you look on my Instagram, there's a video that I posted. And me and my friend were just like, we couldn't find we were like, oh my gosh, did this just happen? And it did happen. And you know what? Even though the Rays lost that series, no one will ever forget that game.
2019 bucket game, IU versus Purdue, that's in West Lafayette. And that game went into double overtime. You know, Peyton Ramsey lifted the team to the win. He had that rushing touchdown right at the end of the game. And I got to be down there on the field, at Purdue to cover that event. And I just remember it was cold and it was wet because it had been raining on and off that entire time. I had my camera wrapped in a plastic garbage bag because I couldn't check out one of the rain protectors at the time because I think I was over Thanksgiving break. So it was sort of chaos to start, but it was so much fun to be a part of it. And I remember at the end of the game, I'm thinking, don't go into overtime. I'm freezing cold. And by the time we got into double overtime, it was, I can't feel my toes anyways. What else do I have to lose? And so I was just having such fun out there covering that game and being able to report on it. And then when IU scored that go-ahead touchdown, or the game-winning touchdown more so, The Hoosiers rushed the field, they celebrated with the bucket, and I just got to be a part of that experience and really a part of that team atmosphere. I mean, I still love Watt Fillier ran over to my camera and sort of headbutted it and was just yelling like, stop playing with us. We're legitimate. We're nothing to be played with. And just to be a part of that atmosphere, so infectious. The team was just so happy to be there, to be a part of that unit. And I was just standing there in the middle of that mess of chaos but it was beautiful.
I have a funny story that I like to share, and it was actually pre Big Ten Network. So I mentioned at the beginning of this interview that I was a local reporter in Lansing, Michigan. And one of my favorite stories I like to share is well, first of all, I've enjoyed my life as a local reporter because I had to pick up the camera, shoot highlights on my shoulder, go to like 3 high school football games, and then come back and edit it, change my clothes, put my hair, get my hair done and my makeup on. And so you're doing all kinds of roles, first of all. Well, in a rare circumstance, I actually had one of our interns who volunteered to be a photographer for me. And it was a Michigan State, Wisconsin men's basketball game. And at the time, Michigan State, I don't know if people remember this name, but Drew Neitzel was the point guard. And in a rare circumstance, it was actually one of Tom Izzo's teams that wasn't guaranteed to make the NCAA tournament. So in this game, Griffin, they're playing Wisconsin, who was ranked number 1 at the time under Bo Ryan. And so to get a win like this would certainly, boost their NCAA resume. Michigan State knocks off Wisconsin. The fans go nuts. The Izzone is storming the field, or the court, I should say. I'm still in football mode. And my intern, his name's Chad. And so we're walking around by the tunnel and the crowd is just a mob. It's chaos. And we see Izzo coming towards us. And he looks at me and so we connect. And I said, Chad, start rolling. I'm going to try to get like an on-court reaction from Izzo. And instead of just waiting for, kind of the mundane podium stuff. So he walks up to me and I ask my 2 questions and he's crying, he's really emotional. And I'm just sitting there, he's giving us great answers and he walks away. And I turn, cause my intern's behind me, Chad's behind me with the camera. And I turn cause I hadn't seen him. And I said, wasn't that great? And the camera lens, which is supposed to be, like this, was hanging like this. So Chad didn't have the heart to stop me in the middle of the interview, but in the chaos of all the students, rushing the field and everything, they had broken our camera. and Izzo was crying and I just wanted to cry. He had walked away and there was nothing that I could do. But I still kind of remember that moment. And though I wanted to cry at the time, I can laugh about it and smile about it now.
If my memory serves me correct, you got some Toronto Maple Leafs cardboard cutouts at Memorial Stadium. I think I saw those on Twitter, and I saw the Maple Leafs Twitter. I enjoyed seeing the Maple Leaf support in Bloomington.
Yeah, they had. I mean, that video had about 60,000 views. It was cool, and I got a lot of notes from back home, which was awesome, including the general manager of the Maple Leafs and people. Wow. It's cool. It's turned into some cool conversations. The spoiler alert is those cutouts are right behind my bench, and they are the only cutouts in the whole building in Wilkinson. So
okay,
that maybe just channeling a little positive energy, but it'll certainly look weird on TV. That you got about 8 hockey players behind our bench, but guess what? I'm the head coach. I get to put stuff places. That's my move, and we'll see if we're terrible the whole year. The cutouts will be moving on.
Those were some fun stories from Coach Air, Lisa Byington, and beyond. Some of my favorite moments for certain on Unpaid Interns. Now, another great part of the last 3 months, we brought on broadcasters, journalists, seniors, graduated seniors from IU, and there's been so much good advice from how to become a good broadcaster to just how to be a good person from so many different people. So here's a look back at some of the best broadcasting and journalism advice from some of our guests over the last 3 months on Unpaid Interns.
It's a very subjective business. Like, to quote Paul Simon, one man's ceiling is another man's floor. So I don't know that there is a formula or a prescription, because even some of the greatest broadcasters of all time, they're going to have their detractors. But But I think that what you can control, not to be repetitive, but you can control how hard you work. You can control how humble you are and how professional you are and how you get along with people. And you can control mastering the fundamentals. Those are the most important things. And you can control how hard you work. I think beyond that, I think you don't have to sound like James Earl Jones, but having a voice that is a pleasant voice, and you can work on that. There are a lot of things you can do to try to work on your presentation, because I think no matter how much information you have, Griffin, you have to be comfortable to listen to. And especially during a baseball season, you better wear well over the course of time, because you're on the air almost every day.
Professors will tell you to be super well-rounded as possible, to be able to write, take photos, take video, be on video like this. And I think that is kind of what it takes, is you have to be super well-rounded. You have to be able to adjust on the fly, because it's just such a moving target. I mean, things change so rapidly in newsrooms. For the newspaper I worked in Alaska, the Juneau Empire, I was there for 2.5 years, and I had 3 different beats. The paper got sold twice. We, moved our offices. It was just a constant exercise in adjusting and learning on the fly and still being able to put out a product every day. So I think that's unfortunately what it's going to take, is that things change so rapidly, and we see this with ESPN and Sports Illustrated, that, even people who have been there for a couple decades are still, their jobs aren't guaranteed all the time. So they have to be able to adjust and get into a new place, a new field, and be able to still succeed. So I think it's just going to take being really flexible, being able to cover a lot of different things in a lot of different ways.
But I like to think a lot of the opportunity, that I can only speak for myself, has come from people that have taken a chance on me, that I know how hard I work, how I treat people. And somebody just has to take a liking to your work too. And I'm hopeful, everybody watching today, I'm hopeful that happens and you can achieve your dreams. I think there are so many jobs for all of us out there. I think a lot of people in the business look over their shoulders saying, what's Dave doing this week? What's Joe doing? Why aren't I calling a game this week? We're all guilty of that, but you can't have that mindset. That's not going to prolong you for success and longevity in this business. That first gig, that second, that third gig might not be that dream opportunity for you, but if it can get you along your path and when the time's right to leave and look for somewhere else, then you go about it, Griffin. But don't worry about the type of gig that you're doing. If you're a college student, what the magnitude of that assignment. Get a tape, get copies of your work, keep it, put it on YouTube, put it on your website, send it to as many people as you can. And hopefully one day you'll get your foot in the door somewhere, God willing, and you'll work your way up in the industry that you're striving to be in for a very long time. But if you're not willing to put in the hard work, the sacrifice, the rejection, the amount of hours being ignored, whether it's by email or on the phone, then I would say this isn't the right path.
I would certainly recommend getting started early. I was one of the people that didn't. I joined the IDS my sophomore year, and I look back on it and I do regret it, but I didn't have a whole ton of experience coming from high school. So as Phil said, it is kind of nerve-wracking, and I took that year to kind of get acclimated to Bloomington before coming to the IDS, and it's led to where I am now. But other than that, when you start early, you do kind of have to work on some of those smaller beats, but I always try to tell people just to try and make those small beats fun, report on them to the best of your abilities. You're probably not going to get, 100 likes on stories from, cross country. I certainly didn't, but I had a fun time talking with players and coaches. You have unrivaled access there. You're not really competing with other media members for questions on those small beats. So it's really a good start for some of those younger writers to kind of build their skills and then eventually work their way up to some of those bigger beats.
my one advice for students in school is a lot of the time, I think when I would watch things like this of people who were, you know, more successful than me, but really successful, and they'd say, you need to do this and this and this. But really, you need to enjoy the time that you spend in college because it is so much fun. And obviously, I know things are different right now, which is unfortunate, but hopefully, you know, nobody works too hard that they can't enjoy themselves.
So much great advice there from some award-winning broadcasters and journalists. Hope you enjoyed our special episode of Unpaid Interns today, taking a look back at some of the best moments, stories, and sound over these last 3.5 months of Unpaid Interns. Hoping for another great 3 months. It's been really fun so far. So many great guests, and know we're going to have many more great guests lined up on Unpaid Interns in the months going forward. In the near future, well, I'm being a little spontaneous. We might have a show on Wednesday. We might not. So stay tuned to the IU Sports Media YouTube and Twitter page, and we'll let you know if we have a show or not. As always, if you've missed any of this show, any of the highlights, which were really fun, if you missed any, I encourage you to go back and watch, or any of our past episodes. Saw one, wanted to go back and watch the full thing. You can always check every episode out on our IU Sports Media YouTube page, Twitter page, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. That will do it for today's special Best of Unpaid Interns episode. I've been Griffin Epstein. We hope you tune in again real soon.